everybody dancing on the streets, Bollywood.
No,
That's what
that's
I
the
thought.
perception.
Oh, okay.
You are thinking everybody's dancing, and
Yes.
he's thinking all
I
are
think it's
living in
poor.
slums.
Yeah, I think it's Slumdog Millionaire.
I talk to people that have been to Cuba. There's so much hunger. There's so much this and that. And I'm like, is there? Because I did not see a homeless person. I did
No,
not
exactly.
see a person
Not,
living
not,
on
not,
the
not, not
street.
compared to New York or San
California
Francisco.
right
yeah.
now, San Diego.
Please welcome Meyer and Christina.
Thank you. I know Christine is a doctor. She just got her doctorate degree.
Wow.
You got to say it, right?
Of course. Of course. I think it's amazing that women need to know that they can achieve high educational status. So
I'm still growing into that. Yes, I just recently graduated, and
I think traveling is the best form of education.
and I agree. And I agree. And I actually think that traveling informs the way that I practice my work and the work that I do, because I work with people.
Yes.
I'm a counselor. I work with students. I help them figure out what they want to do for the rest of their life, right? How can I do that if I only have one lens to see the world?
Yes.
So I believe that every time that I'm traveling, I'm adding different perspectives, different ways of viewing the world. And I can say, based on my experience, right, growing up in Mexico and then coming to the United States and being bicultural, bi ethnic, whatever you want to call me, right? I have that lens, but do I have a lens of you, that you grew up in a different place, of you, that you come from a different background and different life experiences?
When you move from one country to another, you find different languages. So how do you navigate that?
I work with a lot of refugees in San Diego in one of my jobs. And I had this translator that I work with. He spoke 5 different languages.
Nice.
His name was Vojin. And Vojin, he speaks Arabic. He's Kurdish. He speaks Arabic, Kurdish, Farsi, Turkish, English, and he's learning Spanish.
Yes.
And he told me a very wise quote that I hadn't heard before. He said, Christina, if you speak to somebody in the language they learn,
Yes.
you speak to their brain, right? But if you speak to somebody in the language that is native to them, you speak to their heart.
her heart. Yeah, that's
And that Nelson Mandela, I think, said that.
Yes, this is wonderful learning. So I should tell you, hola, ¿cómo estás?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
It's a beautiful thing. And luckily, I was born in a space that I could learn English and Spanish at the same time. I was born in the United States, so I was born in San Diego. But then I was raised in Mexico in a small town called Rosarito. So this is like a
Right on the
beach town.
coast, yeah.
Right
Beach town, right on the coast. Very beautiful place.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful place, and it's pretty small, so you know everybody, right? So I
Or everybody knows you.
Everybody knows you.
You may not know everybody, but everybody knows you.
You're the daughter of so and so. Currently, my house is 25 minutes from the border, the Mexican border. I live in the United States side, and to get to Mexico is 25 minutes. So I just drive into Mexico. 10 minutes from the border is my parents' house.
Wonderful.
So in 35 minutes, I can get to see my parents in another country.
Different country, different culture, different food, different
everything.
Yes,
And the
yes.
moment that you cross that border, you're like, I'm in a different place. I'm in a different land. I remember my parents, like we would go to the United States on the weekends and stuff. And then we would come back into Mexico. Always sigh. They will be like,
the breathing in the Mexican air.
right. When they cross into Mexico, they had a sense of
Relief.
The feel of
I'm home.
It's a warm.
home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were born in United States, but you are more passionate about Mexico.
But her heritage is Mexican, so come on. It's
So
the
heritage
national.
matters.
Well, I think nationalism matters. We get so caught up into the nationalism of the country
Yes.
that we lose our own identity because we say, oh, no, I'm this, I'm Indian, or I'm American, or I'm a Mexican.
Yes.
And so we lose our identity and thinking, no, I'm a human being
Yes.
Yes.
who happened to grow up
Yes.
in this culture, in this country.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we allow the culture and the place to identify us as opposed to identifying ourselves. No, I'm a human.
Exactly. And that is what Maya was telling me in the last podcast, that the biggest problem with us, that we don't know who we are, right? And traveling brings us closer to know who we are.
Of
Because we
course.
need to discover ourselves.
Right.
So how do you discover yourself whenever you move from Mexico to US or
Yeah.
US to Mexico,
That's a great question. For the opportunity growing up in Mexico,
yes,
because I lived there, or I studied in Mexico until I was 15, but I physically moved to the United States until I was 20, right? And so growing up in Mexico, I never had to question if I was Mexican or, so I'm Mexican because I look like my people. I am cultured like my people. We have the same traditions. We have the same language.
Yes.
So there's no question of who I am
yes,
because I'm
yes.
just Mexican.
You didn't have
Right.
to question their identity because the identity your cultural identity was the cultural
Where,
also in the country. Yeah.
right,
Yes, yes,
right.
yes,
And so moving into the United States,
yes,
and I started going to high school in the United States.
yes,
And so I went to a place that was East San Diego, and it was very much, I think, in my high school at the time, 90% white Americans.
yes,
And then we had 50 black,
yes.
5-0.
50,
Yeah.
50. I
No,
mean,
90
count them.
Right out.
Or, you know,
That's
50 people.
There's only 49, but it's okay. 50 is a good round number.
Yes, so it was like, let's say 49 people. And then you had 50 Chaldeans. So Chaldeans are Iraqis that are more Christian.
All right.
And so, and then you had, let's say 100 Mexicans, and then you have 5 Asians. So going from me being Mexican, everybody around me being Mexican, to going is like, you are part of this group, but you're not part of these other groups. So it was that concept that I've never been exposed to, right? And although I spoke English,
Yes.
so I kind of connected with people in my English language, but it was just like all of a sudden I was set into this group that I've never really had consciousness that I was a part of,
Right.
because you're just Mexican.
Now, I have a perception that Mexico means lot of crimes, lot of things, but is it true?
Why do you have that perception?
Wow,
Maybe I got
really?
got
Can
this
we really
perception
talk
from
about
the
this?
news channels, maybe.
And that's what happens, right? Media has such power of shifting our perception of places and potentially
Not just shifting, shaping.
shaping,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
especially what you feed yourself with, right?
Yes.
Right.
If you're somebody that only takes certain type of information, then that's going to be your perception of the world. I come from Mexico, and I know the perspective of the world.
Every time you travel, you get a new perspective
Yeah, I either add or take away certain previous thoughts that I had.
to take away something too.
Exactly. And even like another example of this was in the Ivory Coast. I was in the Ivory Coast during Ramadan. In the capital, Abidjan, the majority of the population is Christian because it was Ramadan, which is a Muslim celebration. A lot of the Christian brothers and sisters were still fasting, right? Why? Because you are your brother's keeper, right?
This is empathy.
Empathy.
Exactly.
Because even if it was the minority of the population, you still want to be supportive to their practices because you live
Wonderful.
together,
Yes.
right? And so that in itself, I'm like, again, it's just like, we think about, certain places being the standard of living and being the standard of how you're supposed to live.
I'm really moved by this story. We
Yes,
have so much of narrow-mindedness when you stay in our own place. Whenever we
exactly.
move out of the country, we see the world.
Right. And even like another example is Cuba, right?
Yeah.
What are the thoughts and communications that we received since we were young? Cuba's a communist country. They're doing everything wrong. And even to this point, I see people or I talk to people that have been to Cuba. There's so much hunger. There's so much this and that. And I'm like, is there? Because I did not see a homeless person. I did not see a person living
Not compared to New York or San
California
Francisco.
right now, San Diego.
And can you share your perspective about Mumbai?
So my perception of Mumbai changed when I landed and I saw that it's not all slums and that it is a really beautiful city.
Yes.
Most of our perceptions, I think, are tinted by media that we talked about we consume. In a lot of cases, it's movies.
Yeah.
And there was a movie that was very popular about a young boy and his existence in Mumbai and in India in general.
Yes.
And so I did carry that perception with me that it was going to be dirty.
All of Mumbai is like that.
All of it. Yeah, of course.
Of course.
I thought all of Mumbai was like
The
that.
slums, right?
But yeah, exactly. Yeah, but when you get there and you realize, and I think because that was earlier in my travels, I've learned now I don't have any preconceived because I've been fooled a lot. You know? So now I just bask in the wonderfulness of how the country has developed or is developing.
Yes.
So Mumbai took me by surprise. I was really surprised I mean, yes, there are the ghettos. Yes, there are slums, but not nearly at the scale that you would lead to believe exists.
One of
right?
the richest cities of the world is Mumbai.
Yeah, no, I believe that. I believe that. But that's not.
Can you
that's
clarify
not the
this?
portray.
Is everybody dancing on the streets, Bollywood? No. Is that not happening? Is that no? That's what I thought. Oh, okay.
That's the
That's
perception.
everybody dancing all the time.
You are thinking everybody's dancing, and he's thinking, oh,
I think it's poor. No, I'm thinking Slumdog Millionaire.
So it's just really interesting how all of that is
perception changes from country to country.
Exactly. In Mexico, I am considered morena, which is brown skin, right? And when I moved to the United States, everybody's like, oh my God, look at your skin. It's so beautiful. Like, you're so light skinned. And I was like, oh, interesting. The perception of
Yes.
your skin
Yes.
depending on where you are in the world.
In the world, yeah.
And I found that traveling. Like, if I go to West Africa, they tell me I'm a white woman, and because I'm not black, right? And then if I go to, Mexico,
Yeah.
I am more on the dark skin.
Yeah.
I go to the United States, I'm the desirable level of darkness.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm level for this.
And so it's
That's an
like,
interesting way to put that.
people pay to get my tan,
Exactly.
right? People go to tanning salons to have my skin complexion.
So in your travels, what do you think is a perception that you left home with that changed after your travel when you got back home?
Well, I learned different things in every single place that I go to. Like, even if I think about going to Ghana. So I was like, well, who do I know from Ghana? Who can I connect me to Ghana? So I traveled with one of my good friends, Gabrielle. She has lived in Rwanda for 5 years, and she was more familiar with traveling
In Africa.
in Africa. My friend Gabrielle was similar to me, that we talked to the rocks, right? Like, we talked to everybody. So she had me this, like, she talked for 8 hours in her flight to this Ghanaian man that was flying from Texas to Ghana. And he was going for his mother's funeral.
His mother's funeral.
His mother's funeral.
Okay.
So it was in this little village that was outside of Accra, the capital. And so they became friends. And he was like, well, you should come to my mother's funeral. And Gabrielle was like, you know what? I would love that. And I know that
That's a huge
Christina would
experience.
love that. And the reason she knew that is because she understood what a celebration of life
Yeah.
it is to go to a funeral in Ghana and majority of African countries. It's a celebration.
Yeah, it is. And it's really interesting because when I was in Indonesia, the same thing happened. I was in Bali
Yeah.
with my daughter, and the same thing happened. They were burying their father, and there was a whole ceremony, and they said, well, come participate in the ceremony.
Right.
So they surround me and put the hat on,
Yes.
and we're doing the prayers and passing the fire, and so that's a huge experience that most tourists don't get to experience.
No.
And it's certainly not Westerners when we're traveling. We don't get
course
to
not.
experience that.
Yes.
You know?
No.
My traveling in Africa is different because I am a male. But I'm curious, as a female, how do you think you're perceived in that type of environment where you're lighter than most of everyone
Right.
there, and you're female, and what is typically a patriarchal society? Yeah.
In this case, because I was traveling with my friend and I trusted her in her ability to make decisions, that was a big one. But I also trust myself in my intuition, right? And so as a female traveler, I do have to be a lot more aware of certain situations. I have to pay more attention. I have to make sure that I have certain exit plans if necessary, right? And so,
When you say exit plans, you mean ways of escaping threats?
yeah, potentially. Or if I feel uncomfortable in a situation. So we decided to go with the taxi driver from our hotel
Right.
that we had already established some rapport with this person. The hotel in itself, it
I was going to
kind
say,
of like a-
hotels are kind of a voucher for him.
Right. So the hotel's already, vetted these people, and
Exactly.
it's a small hotel. They knew that we were going, so it's kind of like, okay, we got our person. The hotel knows, and we know the owner of the hotel because she lived there too. It's kind of like one of those smaller hotels, and so she knew where we were going and all of this stuff. So it's those additional safety measures sometimes that you have to take as a female. I know that even traveling here, I share my location when I'm going on a taxi by myself.
Grab.
So is that an additional layer of awareness
Yes.
that you have to have? And potentially, like, if I'm traveling by myself, I will never stay in an Airbnb, right? I will always
Is it because you feel more isolated?
well, there's just so many variables that I cannot control, right? So if I stay in a hotel, at least there's somebody that's seeing me coming in and out every day. So if I go missing, maybe somebody will be like, what happened to this person in 102, right?
Right.
So it is just that visibility too.
So for our lady viewers,
Yes.
this is probably a good takeaway.
Yes.
Is that you want to always be aware? Is that what you're saying?
Right, aware.
Aware of that there's some kind of exit plan in case something. Oh, well, you can tell it better.
Yeah, and I can give you a perfect example. I was in Catania and I was with a friend, a female friend also, and we were just talking in this plaza. It was like 11, 12 at night. We were just talking. And I'm noticing people walking around, but I noticed specifically these two men that kept walking around and kind of making their rounds back and forth. I was like, interesting. My friend's talking and like, you know,
Was this your intuition picking up, or
Yes.
okay?
Yes. So my friend is just talking, blah, blah, blah. We're having a great time. And so, okay, it's time to go back to our Airbnb. Okay. So let's go. We start walking. And it was isolated at that point. There wasn't a lot of people on the streets or anything. And so as we're talking, as we're walking back home, I kind of turn to her and I see in my peripheral vision the two men that I had seen in the plaza.
Oh.
And we were already a couple of blocks into our community.
So they were following you at this time?
Well, I told my friend and I was like, okay, so we're going to start walking. Trust me, Liz, we're going to start walking a little bit faster. She's like, okay, just act normal, keep talking. And so we're walking, we keep talking. These men were still kind of like catching up to our
Keeping pace with you.
Yes. And so we're getting close to where our Airbnb is. And I was like, well, I remember from walking every day that there is this little bar right before we get to our Airbnb. And so what we need to do, I was like, trust me, I'm going to tell you when to turn and we're going to do a U-turn. And so we're walking and I'm like, okay, now U-turn. And we literally cross in front of these men. I look at them in the eye, like, I know what you're doing. I see you. And then we walk into the bar. And so we walk into the bar and I tell the bartender, I think these men are following us.
Yes.
As we did the U-turn, the guys were kind of like, they don't know what to do. So they ended up doing a U-turn and looking into the bar and then walked past the bar. And when the bartender came out, they crossed the street and then started walking the other way.
So that's just part of the safetyness,
It's part of
safety awareness.
Awareness in general. Because if I hadn't noticed that they were in the plaza doing their rounds already,
Yes.
right, I would have not perceived that they were right behind me
Exactly.
later on, or I just thought that it was random people,
Right.
right? So as a female, we do have to be hyper alert. And I'm not going to say that I am like paranoid. I'm not paranoid. I'm just observant.
You're not?
I'm not paranoid.
So just
That's cool. That's
Just
cool.
sure.
So, what are the safety tips you can give to our women viewers?
Try not to walk by yourself at night.
That's what.
But I mean, I felt a little bit safer because I was with my friend, right?
Yes.
Then just be aware of your surroundings,
Exactly.
right? Definitely do not get intoxicated. That is not a good idea. And that definitely lowers certain levels, especially if you're traveling by yourself.
So it diminishes your awareness tremendously.
Exactly.
Yes.
And, you know, if you do have an encounter like the one that I have, like make sure that you are able to react to it appropriately, right? So in my case, there was a couple of things that I did right. One, I tried to escape the situation, right?
Yes.
I didn't walk all the way to my Airbnb because that potentially put me in danger. The sharing of eye contact with that person or those people was making a statement like, I see you, I know what you're trying to do and you're not going to get me. And then tell somebody,
And I'm
right?
strong enough.
Right,
Yes.
right. Even in a hotel, I wouldn't have walked back to my hotel. I just would
I
have
think
avoided that
that's a good
situation.
tip. That as a female traveler, you have to be aware that there are people watching your movement. You really don't want to probably tip them off to where you're staying.
No,
Yes.
So
avoid at all costs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. There's sometimes where there's romantic interludes, and that happens, and so
Yeah, and that happens too. Yeah.
yeah. For the most part, it is being protective of where you're staying.
Mhm.
And I think what was really also key is that you observed earlier
Right.
Yes.
where some escape routes might be, and that bar
Right.
ended up being an escape route for
Right.
you, right? But that was also that awareness you talked about, being aware in your environment when you're walking around, when you're doing things, and your intuition. Your intuition was,
Mm-hmm.
I'm being followed.
Yes.
Right.
These guys are up to no good.
Mm-hmm.
Allegedly, we don't know.
Yeah. At this point, we don't know. Maybe they just wanted to talk to us.
Maybe they just wanted to say hello. Just trying to figure you out. What's that light-skinned girl doing there? and then, so having that awareness, but also the awareness to start putting the dots together. Okay, if something happens, where is the exit for me? I think we shared that earlier.
Right. And just to be clear, like I wasn't like looking for escape routes. That was not my thing ever. But I want to, like, in case my phone dies, I want to know how to get back home.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So
So I'm
landmarks.
always looking. I'm like, oh, okay, it's this many blocks. I'm going back. I pride myself in having good sense of direction. But
That's a good thing to have, because
Right.
I know a lot of women who don't. I know a lot of guys who don't.
right.
And
It's not
my own
gender
personal
specific.
experience of being in the Amazon, you need to get landmarks.
Right.
Because there are no maps. You need to know where that tree was and how high that tree was, and that was it by this rock or was it by that rock?
Right. And I
Sense of
actually
direction.
think that comes from like growing up in Mexico, because the way that we teach direction is like, you know, there's this Oxxo, which
Yeah.
is like a store, and you
Grocery
turn.
store, 7-Eleven.
It's like a 7-Eleven. There's Oxxos everywhere. So now you're like the third Oxxo in that same block. You turn right, or there's this blue house with the big tree in the front. So you're very much like very observant at all times.
Yes.
And like even to this point, like people would tell me like, why don't you use like maps or Google Maps or ways to get to different places? Like if I already know the route, if I go once, I will remember how to get back.
Yeah. There's a high probability. I think that's very indicative of most travelers. Most travelers are very navigational savvy, and we're looking for landmarks because the phones do die.
So that's the point. We should not be dependent only on the mobile phone. We have to have some landmarks.
I think as a traveler, it's smart to be aware of the environment, as Christina has pointed out, especially as a woman traveler.
Yes.
Well, I think it's true of any traveler. If you're in a foreign country,
Yeah.
you need to be paying attention
Yes.
to where the landmarks. I happen to like architecture, so for me, it's
It's
buildings. It's how the buildings are and what the buildings look like. So it makes it a little bit easier for me. I don't look at street signs because I can't pronounce the names most of the time.
Yeah.
But I know there was a white building there, and I know it was 3 stories, and it had this cookie trim on it. Then I remember.
So whenever you travel,
Mm-hmm.
do you document those things? I saw many travelers, they were so busy with documenting all those things, taking photographs.
Ah.
And in this process, they lose the essence of the traveling, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's where I have conflict, because I tell him I kind of want to be a travel influencer, right? But then I don't like to take pictures. So then, then that's the hard part. So for me, I actually have a hard time taking pictures of the places that I'm going to. And my family, my dad always says, how do I know if you went there if you don't take pictures?
Yeah.
And then he's like, don't take pictures of the things. I want you in the pictures. He's like, I can Google the pictures.
It's good to take pictures, but I have seen so many people, they are busy with taking the picture all the
not
time
present.
and
They're not
not
present.
enjoying
Exactly.
the present moment.
Right. And that also plays into the not being as observant as you need to.
Exactly.
Yes,
Right? If you are too busy with the angle of the picture and like how many poses you have to do,
Yes.
then you're not really paying attention to the building behind you and where is it
Or the
located
setting.
in comparison to where you want to go and all of that stuff. So I know that technology, I know that documenting everything is super important for many people.
Yes.
But like me personally, I don't travel for a pretty picture anymore. I travel to connect to where I'm going.
So what does that mean, connect with where I'm going?
So connecting with our going, it's food, it's people, it's history, right? So for me, one of the big things that I like to do is, one, learn a little bit of the place that I'm going before I get there. And then secondly, have conversations with people that are living there and that have the experience of that place, right? Because history is taught by the eye of the beholder, right?
Or the conqueror, anyway.
Or the
That's why it's called his story, not our story.
Wise out of the show and new young out. Thank you.
Thank you for subscribing. We appreciate that. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you can. It always helps us. Thank you, Christina, for coming.
Thank you for inviting us. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.